All right, welcome everyone. I'm so glad you took the time out of your day to enjoy your lunch perhaps while you're enjoying this presentation on the rise of J. Christopher in the Chehalem Mountains. And we are joined by a great group of spokespeople for the winery. First and foremost, we're joined by Ernie Lozen, the owner of Dr. Lozen and Lozen Brothers and J. Christopher and other projects around the world. Always curious, always interested, and always fascinating to listen to. So I'm excited to hear from him. We're also joined by Tim Malone, the winemaker, specifically for J. Christopher, Cliff Robin, the general manager, and Daniel Emmis, who's in charge of production, and he's going to talk to us about sustainability. And this is going to be a great exploration if you have not spent time absorbing information about J. Christopher Wines. I think you will be delighted at the end of the story about the information that you can tell your clients, that you can relay as you become an ambassador for this brand. And that is our goal today. We want to engage you in a conversation about storytelling. We want to engage you in the thought process of I can be an ambassador and I can tell this story. And not only can I tell it, but I can tell it with excitement because there's legitimacy here. And there's quality and there's value on top of all of that. So as we continue this conversation, keep that in the back of your mind that you're looking for words, you're looking for sentences, you're looking for thoughts that you can transfer to people as to why they should buy a bottle of J. Christopher or a case or a pallet as needed when it's time. Ernie, welcome from Germany. Thanks for taking the time in the evening. And I appreciate your smiling face as always.
Yeah, well, and hi to everybody from here, from Germany, from the beautiful River Mosel. And it's great pleasure. I mean, it's great pleasure, you know. I mean, COVID has something good, at least, you know, because you can do these meetings, these Zoom meetings, and you reach much more people. As you know, in the old days, you have been traveling, and then the Friday afternoon, you had then only the sales rep from New York or so, you know, in the tasting room. But now you, oh my God, you reach so many more people at the same time, you know. So from that point of view, I really enjoy this way to do these tastings and seminars.
I agree. I think that yes, there have been a few good things that have come out of COVID.
Yeah.
This is one of them. There aren't many, but there are a few.
Oh, no,
this is a great one.
Yeah, less traveling.
Yes, less traveling. Although for me, that's made me a little sad. All right, so let's jump right into this.
Yes.
I really feel like J. Christopher is just a very authentic extension of who I know you. I'm.
Oh, sorry.
I was worried about the same thing with our dog because my daughter just came home and he's yipping downstairs. I don't know if he can be heard or not. So kind of, you know, not that I know you like family knows you, but I've met you a few times. I've talked to you and interviewed you, and I just get this sense of authenticity from you that is like an extension of how you're kind of curious about things and places and what can be done. So, you know, in this particular time frame, we're making this transition out there in the world of consumers, out there in this world of consumers that is moving from a group about my age, I'm 52, towards the next generation and the one after that. And the new coming wine consumers are those folks looking for authenticity, and they like to hear the brand story, and they like to know that there's soul and heart behind something. And I think this is an easy story for J. Christopher to tell, and I just want to hear it from you. So, you know, how do we talk about J. Christopher as this authentic extension of Ernie Lozen's curiosity and patience?
Well, you know, I'm really coming from the Riesling side, you know. I'm a Riesling guy, you know. That is what I'm famous for, you know. And so we, as you already said, I produce Riesling not only on the Mosel. We have another estate of Riesling where we produce Riesling and Pinot varietals as Pinot Noir, Pinot Gris, and Pinot Blanc in the Palatinate on the Pfalz, on the Rhine River. We have this project in Washington State. We do Riesling also with a good friend of mine, with Jim Barry, you know, Peter Barry in Australia, as in Oregon. But I think it is in the nature of the of Pinot Noir. You know, I always say Pinot Noir and Riesling. They are the two twins. You know, the red and white twin. You know, sure, we all want to make wine and Burgundy, and I'm a huge Burgundy fan. I tell you, I mean, whoever visited me and all my guys can definitely confirm it. You know, I took COVID. I had time with the COVID now to sort my cellar, you know. Oh my God, you know, I think I'm nearly close to 8 or 9 or 10,000 bottles of Burgundy in my cellar, all back to 1911, you know. So, I mean, I love Burgundy because Burgundy as a red wine is for me very close to Riesling, you know. And so I think every Burgundy lover or every Burgundy drinker loves Riesling, and if the Riesling lovers, if they like a red wine, they like Pinot Noir, you know. So sure, as much as I had the desire also to do something in Burgundy, but if you look to these crazy prices, you know, I mean, I just heard recently, I mean, 1 acre of Musigny, $40 million, you know. I mean, for an acre, you know, I mean, that's insane, you know. But I think there's great places all over the world, you know, to do Pinot Noir. It doesn't necessarily have to be a limestone, you know. I think Riesling as Pinot Noir needs a certain climate that you can grow it, you know. I mean, it doesn't help me much if I have great limestone soil, but then I'm in an area in Sicily where it is bloody hot, you know. I mean, that will not make a great Pinot Noir. Pinot Noir rather needs a cool climate, like Riesling. There's so many things in common, Riesling and Pinot Noir. They need cool climate, you know. Oregon has a cool climate. That's the reason possibly that it became first quite famous for Pinot Noir, or is the Burgundy. For me, that's the Burgundy of the US. And then you need, sure, certain soils, but it doesn't necessarily mean to have it only on limestone, you know. You need this longer hang time, you know. Riesling and Pinot Noir are all based on acidity, you know. They need a certain acidity to perform, you know? And, you know, and there's so many things in common. Also with ageability, you know, if it comes to ageability. Riesling as Pinot Noir age very similar, you know. For me, for example, I mean, in the old days in this area, the people drank Riesling on the old, you know. I don't like Pinot Noir young. I like it old, you know. And that's the reason I have also a lot of patience, you know, to keep Riesling as my Pinot Noirs for a long time, because, I mean, Pinot Noir gains so much with aging, you know, these kind of secondary, tertiary aromas there. I love them so much more if it is only young and bright and only the primary fruit, you know. So with age, they get so much more graceful Pinot Noirs, you know. And by the way, when we just had a tasting last week, you know, I mean, with some friends, crazy Burgundy friends, you know, and we have been tasting down to 28, 29, 32 and 34, 37, 49, 57 and 59, you know, Pinot Noir. I mean, gorgeous, you know, and that is the same with Riesling. These are really brothers in mind, you know, brother and sister in mind, these two great varieties. And, you know, and then Oregon, I always felt, to be frank, I never liked so much the New Zealand Pinot Noirs, so I wouldn't have gone to New Zealand if this would have been rising. I always liked the Pinot Noirs from Oregon, you know, I mean, because you can produce them there very much in a kind of a, say, European style, you know. And what I always like that what we do, we don't rush it, you know. We give the wines the time to over barrel it, you know, to leave it 15 to 18 months in the barrel, you know, to give them, and that Pinot Noir needs the time in the barrel. That's so important for me, you know. So from that point of view, so I must say, I fall in love, you know, I mean, with Oregon. I think Oregon is also a natural place for Europeans, you know. The climate is similar, you know, the hilly-billies are similar to our area, you know, and so from that point of view, I think as a European, you love the Pacific Northwest, you know, I think that's kind of something. I know so many people when they visit the US, they say, "Oh, I love the Pacific Northwest." You know.
Do you remember the first wine experience that piqued your curiosity about the potential of Oregon?
Well, what was the first? I had the first wine experience. My God, that was I showed because we do Pinot Noir with the Villa Wolf estate on the Rhine River, and we showed the Pinot Noir from the Rhine River. It was together with Ganten wine. I was there. Oh my God, Kirk, do you remember? I think it must be 15 years ago. Oh no, even more. No, can't be. It must be. Yeah, it must be something like 15 years ago. So it must be something like 98 or 99, something like that, you know. Great show. Oh my God, these guys doing a really great job, you know, to promote Pinot Noir. So from that point, you know, I mean, if it comes to patience, with the first Pinot Noir I produced in these days with Jay Christopher, you know, with Jay, was a 2005 Appassionata. This is our top cuvée. This wine is still not released, you know. I said, oh, no, I want to keep this wine, and I want to bring it out as soon. I think, yeah, now it's great, you know. But sometimes you need this patience, you know. I mean, you don't always have to listen to bankers, you know. They always want to push and sell, you know, cash flow. No, I think I will and can afford to keep the wines and give them the time until they are perfect. You know, that is very old world thinking, you know. But even here in the old world or in Germany, you don't find many people anymore. You know, I mean, I do the same with Riesling. We have now 350,000 bottles of Riesling in the cellar, which will be released in 10, 15, and 20 years. You know, nobody else has anything like that, you know.
Yeah.
So, but I think we have to go back to the good old days, you know, where, I mean, especially that I drink so many old Burgundies. You see, if you do it right, it's amazing that 100-year-old Burgundies are still amazing, you know. And from that point of view, this is what I think. I want to get a little bit of a reputation there, and we working on that, you know, to do reserves and keep some wines away and then release it again in later days, you know, in later times, you know.
Yeah, you know, I think it's interesting that most of the time people, and I love the fact that you refer to bankers, because I think that most people think of the idea of the way the bankers do. It's like, I got to keep my business moving. I got to keep the cash flow going. I got to do this. And I love the juxtaposition of the idea that no, patience is not just a luxury. Patience is an essential element of greatness.
Yes, absolutely.
And you can't get to greatness without some patience, and you can't get the maximum out of Pinot Noir without a lot of careful, patient interaction, right? And even if you're not planning to hold the wines for 10 years before you release them, and we'll talk about more of this with Tim, right? There's still a patience in the winery, a patience with your management of the grapes and everything else, because it is one of those grapes that it's far easier to mess it up than it is to do it right.
I mean, in Oregon, there's already, that's already a great patience if you keep it 15 to 18 months in the barrel, because a lot of people, have been going to already bottling Pinot Noir just before the next harvest starts, you know, to get a faster cash flow and so on. No? But even the entry level Pinot Noir, simple process, and never does. What I learned also here from our Pinot Noir producing here in Germany, you know, the Pinot Noir needs time, you know, needs time. It's such a huge difference. And even if it is only in stainless steel, I tell you, it's such a huge difference if it is staying only 9 or 10 months in the vat, or you leave it even for 15 to 18 months in the vat, you know. It's a huge difference. The wine is completely different, you know. And I think Pinot Noir needs the time. It needs the time, and you don't have to interfere too much, you know. And as we do it without filtration, without fining, you know. And so don't interfere too much, you know. Leave it, you know, and let it rest, you know. And then Pinot Noir can age so wonderfully.
Excellent. So, greatness. You are one of the most accurate sources that I can reach out to about the greatness of Pinot Noir because of your collection, because of your dedication to it over your lifetime of consuming it. And now you're moving it, then to move into growing it. But before you ever decided to grow it, it was really more about the love of consuming it and drinking it and enjoying Burgundy. And so when we talk about greatness in wine, I know that you have used these words of elegance and longevity. So talk to us a little bit about that and maybe how it applies to the way that J. Christopher is approaching their every bottling.
I think for me, greatness with the wine, I think you can also, I mean, basically apply to every wine, you know? For me, greatness of wine is elegance and at the same time complexity, you know? And often nowadays, the wines are either only elegant, that means it can be a little bit thin, you know, or they're big and boldy, lots of alcohol, you know, rich, you know, I mean, powerful from the nose, you know. But these wines often lack elegance. And what I see, at least from my last 30 years drinking a lot of wine, is that these wines, often these wines which have huge alcohol level, 14.5, you know, or 15, you know, they're beautiful wines if they're young, you know, but they don't develop, you know, they don't go through all these stages as a Pinot Noir does, you know, from this young primary fruit to the secondary aromas. Usually they shut down for 5 to 10 years before they come out with the tertiary aromas, you know, which are so much more graceful. From that point of view, but this you can pretty much apply to every wine, you know, really how you get this, you know, this kind of vicious circle together, you know, that you have the because it's barely contradictory, you know, being elegant and say full-bodied, complex and delicate, you know, these things, how you can get this in balance, you know, and that makes for me the greatest wine, you know, and that is with Pinot Noir. With Pinot Noir, if you reach this with Pinot Noir, I think then Pinot Noir is for me the greatest red wine in the world, you know. I mean, as much as I like Cabernet, and I mean, great, I mean, Bordeaux, absolutely gorgeous, no? But if you get a perfect Pinot Noir, this is unbeatable for me. But it's also the most challenging grape variety, you know? It's the most challenging grape variety, you know? I mean, you can do so many things wrong. I mean, it is a little bit of a diva, this grape variety, you know? You have to get everything right in the vineyard, you know? With not, you know, I mean, it starts with pruning with the right clones, with a, you know, and then during the whole year, you know, and getting, you know, the perfect ripeness. You have to do a lot of selection. Then it goes all the way through the winemaking process, you know. It can be very exhausting, this grape variety, you know. Yeah. But I think that is the challenging thing, you know. And from that point of view, I think every wine freak, I'm pretty much sure he wants to do a Pinot Noir, you know. I mean, somebody who has, you know, high expectations, loves wine. I mean, he wants to do a Pinot Noir. I mean, this is the final goal for your life, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, it is fascinating how the demands of making great Pinot Noir are such that it's the winemaker's Mount Everest of sorts, in that I'm going to summit that peak one of these days, and rarely, and Tim can maybe speak to this later, rarely do you feel at the end, you're like, yeah, that was really, really good, but not often do you get the chance to say, man, I got that just right. Everything worked together with me that time. And I agree with you that when Pinot Noir hits that pinnacle of greatness, there's no experience like it, especially with enough age to let it shine.
It's the Marine McCoy then.
Yes, exactly. And we often see that. And I want to, you know, a lot of people in the audience right now are probably thinking to themselves, yeah, well, that pinnacle and that possibility has only been proven in Burgundy or what have you. And I just don't happen to agree with that. I've had some pretty amazing wines from your neighbors with, you know, 10 and 15 years of bottle age that show that greatness of Pinot Noir that is also possible in acidic soils in Oregon instead of Burgundy. And I don't think you're chasing something that's not possible. I think it's highly possible.
I think so too, because I think what the people, I mean, do is they drink them too young, you know, and then it is very difficult, you know, then to compare it is not fair, you know, because certain areas need more time and not. And I did the same, to be frank, I had the same kind of, you know, view, said, oh yeah, but basically only Burgundy. I mean, so 20 years ago, oh, only Burgundy can make great Pinot Noirs, and all the others, you know, they try hard, they want to copy it, you know. I tell you, with more experience, I lost totally this attitude, because I had wines from Oregon, you know, aged Pinot Noirs. They had been absolutely gorgeous, you know, in tastings and stuff which I bought 20 years ago, you know, and still have it in the cellar. And we open now here and there on a 96 or 94, 93. I tell you, absolutely unbelievable. And there are a few, I mean, we know one of the founder fathers, you know, in Oregon, you know, like Irie. And so I had old Irie, 30 years old. Man, this was gorgeous. You can put it in the blind tasting, and I tell you, and we had these things often in blind tasting with great Burgundies. And I tell you, I mean, Burgundies from other areas with age, you know, just showed great. And the same with Germany. I always thought Germany, oh my God, Pinot Noir in Germany, you know. I had old Pinot Noir, which I found in my cellar from Dr. Heger, for example. I found in 1989, you know, I mean, 31 years old now. I poured it blind to the people, and everybody thought it's a great Burgundy. So from that point of view, you can do it. If you have the right climate, you know, do it right, you know. I mean, and on the other hand, you're not going to Oregon to make a Burgundy, you know. You want to make the best Oregon Pinot Noir. That is the goal, you know, and not to make a Burgundy in Oregon, you know. And that is always, I've said the same with my Riesling in Washington. And so I don't go to Washington to make a Mosel Riesling. I want to make the best Washington Riesling, you know. And that must be the goal, you know, and you can do it. It is proved. It is proved. There are so many examples out there. I mean, especially if you leave it and you give the wines some time, and then you see also the longevity of this area. There is a huge longevity with the wines in this area, you know. You don't have to drink it young, you know.
Yes, so true. And thank you for reiterating from the European perspective how the local nature of Oregon needs to be. It's Oregon. We're making great wine that's Oregon wine. We're not really making anybody else, and that's great. And you know, we got to move on to that idea of local and bedrock, and we're going to talk to Cliff here in just a second. But I forgot to tell the audience, and I want to reiterate, Michael figured it out anyway, and he sent a comment in on the Q&A. Kirk is going to be monitoring the chat window, as you have seen already, and he's going to be answering questions about the winery that you can put in your in the chat. If you have a question for the panel that you'd like to put out there, put that in the Q&A. And Michael submitted a comment that, you know, it's not just Jake Christopher, but Ernie, the Villa Wolf Pinot Noirs are absolutely fantastic. They're changing, things are changing everywhere, and you are really moving the ball forward. And I just wanted to share that comment with you. That's from one of our folks named Michael Fix. Thank you, Michael. Let's move on and talk to Cliff. So Ernie, you can mute yourself and if for a moment, and Cliff, come off. And so, you know, I want you to address the idea of, you know, the new wine, the new structure. Like, hopefully everybody took a look at the document that we sent out. You know, I love this very new clear structure of your national distribution offering. I think the share, you know, so maybe share the vision of the tiers, because I think the tiers actually give you a storytelling aspect of what you're sending out into the marketplace. And you know, especially this idea of the bedrock category now, or tier, however you want to address it.
Yes. So the new tier or structure really focuses on one of our core wines, or core values, local, which Ernie kind of talked about at the end there. Was he really wants to focus on producing wines representative of our local environment. So in trying to capture this concept, I tend to kind of look at this new structure and the expression of the wines in a concept similar to like concentric circles. So we're Oregon-based in the northern region of the Willamette Valley, the heart of Oregon's wine growing culture. And, you know, as we narrow that down to the local AVAs within the Willamette Valley, We're trying to produce focus wines from such AVAs with differing and very specific characteristics that define these AVAs. So from there, we are producing site-specific single vineyard wines, and in some case, even single barrel wines that are very expressive of the particular sites. And this is the same thought process we have in our brand and wine structure. So in keeping with this concept, when you think of typical local wines produced in Oregon, what do you think of? For me, first and foremost, the consumer is thinking about Pinot Noir. About 60% of all wine grown and produced in Oregon is Pinot Noir. So the next two wines after that are Pinot Gris and Chardonnay. We don't produce any Pinot Gris here, and that's all I'll say about that. Chardonnay is generally more recognizable nationally and preferred by the consumer, as you all are aware. It's a varietal we believe grows better and expresses our local climate very well. So it's something that I'm passionate and interested in. And when I became more involved in the project, Ernie and I talked it over, and we kind of changed up our Chardonnay regime, and started producing barrel-aged Chardonnay. Ernie was already aware of the ability to produce quality Chardonnays here in the Valley. So it was a pretty easy concept to sell him on. But to offer you further background to the structure production tiers, our structure was born out of the concept of Burgundy, as Ernie talked about. We cull out the wines most distinctive of the location. We patiently taste through the cellar, identifying the exceptional barrels that should be bottled as single barrel wines from select vineyards, as well as the best barrels to be selected for a potential special blend that Ernie touched on, the Appassionata. And then we focus on single vineyard wines, which are generally our Grand Cru wines, as we refer to them. And then our sub-AVA wines, the Chehalem Mountains, the Dundee Hills, those are our premier cru wines. And then we have the Village or Bedrock wines. And these are the Bedrock wines, like the Basalt. That's our big national wholesale wine that we really hope captures what we want to represent the Willamette Valley. And so we're always looking for wines that best represent their sense of place, terroir, AVA, location. It often means we declassify wines of superior quality to broader production wines, because while they may be high quality, they may not be best expressing the AVA that they come from. Mm-hmm. And so the best expression of location is a very meaningful priority for us. So this is where our core of J. Christopher really begins, with two highly local recognizable varietals as our bedrock wines. So we've got the Basalt, and then we have the Cuvée Lunatique Chardonnay, which is in several wine bill markets, by the way. The Basalt Pinot is our foundational wine. It's our bedrock. It's the wine in the wholesale market. And it is a Chehalem Mountains dominated wine, but it is going forward a Willamette Valley wine. And it's elegant and structured, yet, very expressive as well. And the Cuvée Lunatique Chardonnay, it's mostly produced in stainless, no mallow, more in a Macon style. So, and then we get a little bit more specific in the AVA wines. So the Volcanique from the Dundee Hills and the Lumiere from the Ile Amity. And these are wines that are classic representatives of their AVAs. AVAs that produce noticeably different and distinct wines, in part to varying soils and very different climates due to differing geological occurrences. Mm-hmm. So from there, we have single vineyard wines producing from the major sub-AVAs here. And we generally like to focus on the Chehalem Mountain wines because that's where the J. Christopher Winery is located, as well as our estate planning. And the other vineyard we focus on is Medici Vineyard, which is a vineyard planted 45 years ago, produces very elegant but very light classic wines. And it's just right down the street from the winery. So, and then as Ernie talked about earlier, we've got our Appassionata wines. So these are wines that we released 10 years after harvest. So Ernie talked about these being a not a wine for a banker. Well, I came from public accounting, so this is kind of I guess, a nightmare for a public accountant. As you said, we want to push these out, but this is one of the things I really appreciate about Ernie, the patience and dedication to putting out beautiful wines.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of,
yeah.
go ahead.
That's great. And I love the idea of this concentric circle, because local is a relative term, right?
Yeah.
And there are varying, what I like is there's a local experience in each one of your concentric circles or tiers, right? It's sort of like the draw between a macro, micro, and mesoclimate sort of thing. We can get a local interpretation of basalt soils. We can get a local, like single vineyard, and we can get super hyper local, like single vineyard, but this is just one barrel. And that's a very cool experience at the end of the train of where the consumer interacts with your wines, to be able to draw those lines, for lack of a better description, in the basalt, to define between how specific of an experience do you want to have. And I think this kind of feeds into a conversation with bringing Tim into the conversation, because there's a question up from George Morgado out of Florida that I think is a really great way to launch into this and sort of make a part of this, Tim. And I know that Ernie's going to have something to say here, so he can jump in as well. But the question is, what should we expect from the best Oregon Pinot Noir, and what is going to differentiate the best from the others? So I'm going to start there as the neutral, right? Just the guy who talks about wine in general over the world. And then I'm going to let the two of you deal with that question in a relatively quick way, perhaps, because we still have quite a bit of material to go through. And for me, what marks Oregon is its beautiful moderation. A great Oregon wine is that between point between cool climate wines that are really racy and really electric, and the blousy wines from warmer climates that can be very pleasurable, but to Ernie's point, have a difficult time hanging on to life, right? And Oregon Pinot Noir has that backbone. The structure of the acidity makes it both elegant and powerful at the same time. The beads of flavor profile are numerous, and it's never just one fruit. It's always multiple fruits. And there's a somewhere between the idea of smoky and herbal nature to Oregon Pinot Noir that sort of makes it unique. Is it soil? Is it clone selection? Is it winemaking? It's really hard to say, but all of it together, you just get an experience out of Oregon that is reminiscent of your love of Burgundy, but it's not Burgundy. And it's a little juicy like other New World areas, but more refined. And that's when I run into that, and some of your neighbors and your wines as well give me that expression. That's when I know I've run across, well, this is really high quality Oregon wine. So I'm going to launch you into the conversation about the idea of your winemaking philosophy and how we get this result that each of your wines that I've tasted so far have restrained elegance, and they have and when I use the word transparent, and I think this applies to what you're doing there, it's not just the fact that you're transparent about, we're open about what we do. It's about the wines are transparent. They reveal themselves. They allow you to get to the flavors. There's nothing standing in the way that's awkward and weird. Like, wow, that wine was way over oaked. I can't taste the Pinot Noir anymore. Nothing like that. Okay. So that's where we're heading with you, Tim. And you can adjust, if you want to address the greatness first, or you can address your habits and great Oregon after. You're on mute for some reason. Hold on a minute, Tim. I'm not hearing you. It shows mute. Now try again.
Can you hear me now?
I can. That was really weird. Said you weren't muted, so I muted you. That way we
Yeah,
can,
I had
now we can hear you.
technological issues on my end. So anyway, back on. So yeah, when you said it well, there's kind of there's not one magic bullet, when we talk about what's going to make a great wine. I mean, you're talking about texture and length and balance, and there's so many aspects on what goes into that we don't entirely control. We work with growers and farmers, and especially on my end, I have to work closely with these people so they can, they have a vision, we have a vision. How do we get that to come together and everything that works? So, when we talk about restraint, there's obviously the points of having a wine that's restrained, that's not overpowering, that's going to pair well with food and show the subtleties and complexities of the wine and not be overpowering with a lot of fruit. But in regards to production, we're really showing restraint and not overcropping. Overcropping is an easy thing to do and something you really want to avoid to make high quality wines. But from a financial perspective, of course, people would want to push crop load. But, to really make great wines, you really have to pull your yields back, and you have to be restrained in all ways. A big thing here in Oregon that newcomers run into is picking too early. We oftentimes get rains come through in the fall and people get early. So we really have to restrain ourselves from the urge to pick. For example, in 2013, we got 5 inches of rain in 3 days. And you saw a lot of people looking at their weather apps, right before that, and they just jump in there and they pull all their grapes before they're ready, and it's the whole battle of physical versus physiological ripeness. So really being restrained on picking decisions and being restrained not to inoculate in the cellar for primary or mallow, or restraint from filtering or over extraction, or restraint from bottling too early, and really giving the wines time to clarify so that you don't have to filter them. So that's really some of in my opinion, what really makes great wines would be a wine that's, has longevity to it, shows restraint, and really is balanced. So those are some of the key aspects that I really like in a wine. You start getting into other aspects, like you mentioned transparency in the wine, and I couldn't agree with you more. Having a wine that's transparent, it's not over fruity, or it's not too much wood, or it's not picked too early and overly acidic. You have these wines that are transparent. I think that's a hallmark of a great wine. Something for me, especially with Pinot Noir, is its ability to pair with food. And when you have wines that are out of balance and not transparent, I find that they lose that ability. So. But also in relation to transparency in the industry, as you mentioned, that's one of the reasons I picked Oregon over California, is just this transparency within the industry. I've worked with some great people over the years, and even just friends of mine. For example, Patty Green comes to mind. She was always this really great person, always really open to me just stopping by whenever I needed to ask questions. Steve Dorner from Christum, another one who's just always welcoming. I never worked for the guy, but just a very welcoming guy who always just brings me in and lets me really just pick his brain on everything. And another one, John Paul from Cameron, another guy who I did actually work for years ago, who really just gives you all the information you need and will just help you in any way that he can, So that's another thing I think makes Oregon great, is just we're relatively young compared to the old world, California, but we really have interest as a community at heart. We all know that there's room for us out there, and we all work together. And even though we share a lot of information, we're still making our wines differently, and it really gives us the opportunity to really just shine individually and have a lot of transparency within the entire system. In regards to elegant wines and the longevity, I think often words I like to use that kind of convey that are things I keep in mind really when I engage in the craft of winemaking, which I really think that relates to blending. I think everything we do in production is exactly that, production, but really where the craft comes in is in blending. And some of the things I really think make an elegant wine are a seamless palate. So we always talk about linear and seamless palates. And we always talk about texture and length. And that's really where some of the hard work is done, where I spend most of my time is blending. I spend tons of time just in the cellar, just trying numerous possibilities over and over again. revisiting blends, doing comparisons, setting up blind tastings with other guys in the cellar.
Mhm.
And we just work tirelessly really on this aspect of the business, where we really try to build these elegant, textured, well-balanced, long-lived wines.
Okay.
So
So in the idea of production and things that you conscientiously, intentionally do as a
Mhm.
winemaker, other than the blending, because we got that point.
Yep.
Things you're doing that give you a chance to make an elegant, restrained wine,
you could arguably talk about the things I'm not doing, which is,
I like that.
I'm not inoculating for primary fermentation. We're not inoculating for malolactic fermentation. We're doing no more than one punch down a day because we're trying not to over extract. We're not heating or cooling wines. We're not enforcing cold soaks. We're not heating them up to getting them going. We're really hands off. Basically, we get it in. We have a very vigorous sorting program. We have 4 to 6 people on the sorting line.
Right.
We can do about 2.5 tons an hour. It's relatively slow compared to a bunch of other wineries. And once it's in the fermenter, we try to pick it in the morning to keep it relatively cool. And every site is different. For example, Medici Vineyard has a very, very robust native yeast population. It doesn't matter how cold we pick it. Within 24 hours, that wine is fermenting.
Cool.
It kicks off and we let it go. And that's one of the reasons it's a little bit more, a little bit lighter of a wine, because it doesn't cold soak as long. And so we don't enforce a cold soak.
Okay.
And then Dundee Hills fruit generally is the opposite. Usually you can destem it, pick it cold, and it will cold soak sometimes as long as a week or 10 days on its own without firing up on primary fermentation by itself.
Okay.
In regards to barrel programs, we stick to about 20% new wood. We certainly have various coopers we work with that work better with different vineyards and different AVAs, but we're really not trying to add the wood component to the wine as much as we're trying to lift the elements within the wine. And that's really where different AVAs come into in line with different coopers, as where if you put the wrong wood on the wrong wine, the wood will dominate, as opposed to, for example, Gillet works extremely well on Dundee Hills fruit, and it really just helps lift the fruit and it doesn't overpower the wines. So in regards to, cellar work, we're relatively hands off, no fining and no filtering.
Yep.
So, if anything ever did have to be fined or filtered, it gets declassified and it wouldn't be in anything that you guys would see.
Okay.
So we really take a hands-off approach. Like I said, one of the things I've learned from working from great winemakers out here is really the blending aspect is really where I'd say we perhaps differentiate ourselves from a few other people anyway. We spend, and we also have the luxury of blending where some Burgundy producers don't, where they have 2 barrels of a great vineyard, and it is what it is. It's just there's no blending options. It's just they blend those 2 barrels together, and that's what it's going to be. Fortunately, we have the means, and that's another great thing about Ernie is he really gives us the time. It's the one reason I love working with Ernie is that I get this opportunity to really make the wines great. There's not financial constraints, and there's not these limitations that I have to meet. He's all about making the best wine, and that's the priority, which is great because it really gets me to really engage in the craft and do what I think is going to be best for the wine.
Right. Okay. And Cliff is down there going, what do you mean there's no financial constraints? Are you crazy? There's
every once in a while, he ropes us back in.
All right. Before Ernie jumps back in on the idea of what he thinks marks Oregon, because I really want to hear his take on this with his worldwide wine experience palette. I just want to throw this in as a comment about what you're not doing, right? I was interviewing Johan Henschke, the new winemaker for Henschke in Australia. And, 170 years of history in that winery, 6 generations of families, right? Mm-hmm. And so the concept of the interview was about innovation. And I was like, what are you doing as the new winemaker, as Henschke, to innovate? And he said, well, I'm being innovative by not doing anything.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's perfect. Exactly. You don't need to do anything new. The wines are doing fine. Just keep going. So Ernie, your impressions of, kind of 2 sentences or so on what makes a great Oregon wine.
Well, what I see with Oregon, at least, in comparison to Burgundy, Oregon wines are a little bit earlier approachable. You know, they are definitely, and as young wines, I love them much more as Burgundy because they're more approachable. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they can't age. You know, so
Right.
from that point of view, I often thought, that was often my theory, wines which are already very approachable as young wine, they can't age, you know, because they show off already everything. Where should they go? But the great thing is that is, again, something with Oregon, which is fascinating, you know, with a lot of, I mean, you know, with a lot of wines, it is like that, you know, but with Oregon, you know, it is very approachable as young wines, you know, and it is a little bit, as you said, a bit more herbal, you know, and I think that's due to the soil, because it is quite a lot of volcanic soil and these kind of things, which we see also with our volcanic soils here in the Mosel. You have a little bit more this herbal aromatics, which I like very much, due to the soil. It expresses the soil, but then the wine can also age. You know, I mean, all the wines, you know, going a little bit into a depression, you know, of overaging, you know. But then if they come out, I mean, it comes. And they come out a little bit more elegant than with age, you know? It is amazing how they, and that is the great thing. If a wine ages, it changes, you know? If a wine age and doesn't change, tastes the same like it was young, you know? And, you know, that is very uninteresting for me. And Oregon goes through these kind of phases, you know, with age, you know, where it changes, you know, and shows different faces, you know? I mean, like great characters, you know? Charismatic people, you know, you also change very much, you know, with age, you know, and become more charismatic and more interesting. And Oregon Riesling, Oregon Pinot Noirs get very interesting with age, you know, and shows a lot of, you know, these tertiary aromas, which are extremely interesting, you know, with the wines, you know. So from that point of view, it's a great place to grow Pinot Noir, you know. I mean, I don't see it so much with California, you know. I mean, especially if it is from warmer areas, you know. If it comes up to 15% alcohol with Pinot Noirs, I think that is not the climate where you should grow Pinot Noir. You know? I know these are very approachable and nobody puts the wines away, but I don't care. For me, a great wine, I don't care if people put it away or so. But for me, it is not a great wine if it is not great with age, you know? Sure, 99.9% of the people will never see this wine with age, you know? But what we drink, you know, that makes it, for me, great, you know? And I think always, you have to think with winemaking also about ageability, you know? Is this, because this is quite complex, but if you make a young wine, a wine, you know, then you have also, you should have in mind, can this wine also age? Because the few persons which will drink this wine in 50 years, you know, and say, my God, this is great. Because, I mean, I know it is not the case in America to keep wineries for 5 generations in the property. But that makes it, but that is for me the style of family business, to keep it for 3-4 generations, you know, that you can go to the, you know, to the cellar and open a 30-40-year-old bottle of wine, you know, and then the people say, oh my God, if I buy a bottle like this, you know, possibly my kids can drink it also in 40 years, you know. So I mean, I have a much more longer view to a winery, you know. So I'm not an investment banker, you know, to bring it up, you know, make it nice and then get a high price if I sell it, you know. We want to keep it, you know, and that's the reason I mean, if it comes to investment, no, I really, as long as I can afford it, I allow that we can do the best, you know, and that costs money. Anyway, it's an investment in the future.
Exactly. It's an investment that will reap rewards. I have great certainty of it. And if there are any questions about that in our audience, you can keep an eye on Tasty Expectations on Winebow's YouTube channel, where I will be posting over the next couple of months. Older bottles of J. Christopher have been sent to me so that I can taste them and tell you what I think about them, so that you have a secondary opinion, not just Ernie's excellent opinion of his own wines, which I don't doubt at all. However, we do need to move on, and there is a question in the Q&A that I'm going to get to in a moment, in case Adam is nervous that it won't get answered. But let's deal with this first. Daniel, let's talk about sustainable, because this is a big watchword right now, nationally, globally, right? Is to move into an era where more and more people are doing sustainable farming, which Ernie would probably tell you, oh, you mean the farming we used to do before before we had any other options. Exactly, yes. And so talk to us about how J. Christopher is watching the sustainability of the land. And I understand even inside the winery, there's a definite moves towards sustainability.
Yeah, as Ernie said, I mean, we are working with and in nature over generations. So therefore, sustainability, I think, is a big responsibility for us wine growers and winemakers. And yeah, at J. Christopher, we tackled it on many levels, I would say. First, it started with the planning of the whole enterprise. In fact, we kind of took the ecological impacts into account. For example, on our 40-acre property, we only planted 22 acres with vineyards, and we left a lot of space for like a wildlife corridor is on our property. There's also wetlands that we kept. We also kept a lot of old oak trees that were growing around the property. Even those we had to remove. We used the wood for flooring or furniture around the winery. Energy efficiency was a big deal when we were planning the winery. So for example, I haven't seen any of that in other wineries, that we have barrel caves underground, which allows us to use no cooling, and it also gives the perfect environment for our wines to age, and for the barrels it's a perfect humidity and temperature control as well, which is also just naturally. We are also using solar panels, which give us a great deal of our energy we are using is produced there. Our crush pad was designed in a way that it works with gravity. So also there, already in the planning phase, we kind of already put all these concepts into place, and these are now working pretty good together. Our vineyards are all farmed sustainable and organically. We're not using any chemical fertilizers, and we are only using approved organic soil additions, and we even reuse our pomace so we compost our pomace and reuse those. In the cellar, sustainability for us means we are working with suppliers that are either sustainably certified or can prove that they are working sustainable. We are recycling and reusing materials as much as possible. We process so we treat our processed water, and then it's also released back into these wetlands which we have on our property. So all in all, our winery goals going ahead from here are like constantly assessing what we are doing in relation to our economical, but also social impact for the people around us, and try to develop a strategy for constant improvement over time, you know.
Awesome.
I mean, yeah, we're constantly tackling new things and monitoring what we are doing. So it's a constant process, but I think we're already on a good way there.
Excellent. Yeah, I think you've thought of a lot of things, and I think that you can use that word in describing J. Christopher without any hesitation whatsoever. And, you know, just to be upfront with folks in the audience, why not call it organic? Well, you source grapes from other people, and not in order for you to be an organic winery, everybody would have to be organic. So sustainable is a better label for you. Let's move on into this concept, because I think this is super important. And Cliff, you're going to be talking to this one. And then, by the way, this is where we're very close to allowing questions en masse from the audience, but I want to make sure that we respect your time. We've got about 5 minutes left to talk about these things that are on our agenda without your questions. And that is the idea of rising. One of the things that I notice about Jay Christopher and the other things and reading through all of the stuff that's going on at the winery right now is a very intentional step-by-step process to put you in a different place notoriety wise, as well as brand recognition wise. And I think you've set it all up based on everything we've said so far, right? There's no way that Jay Christopher wines aren't rising. So talk to us, Cliff, about some of the ways that they are rising.
Well, rising, I mean, in general, before I even touch on JC, but we do see ourselves as a rising entity. I mean, Oregon and specifically the Willamette Valley is a rising category. I mean, you see it in the data, the Nielsen ratings, IRI data, articles presented monthly and quarterly that regurgitate the data. It's a hot category right now. You have the KJs, the Druins, other recognizable Burgundians, professional athletes, they're all buying in. And for us, we're creating our own separate identity as a local Oregon winery. It doesn't hurt to have a global ambassador of Riesling and one of the rock stars of wine in general, Ernie Lozen, behind you. And Ernie certainly gives us the freedom and autonomy to be our own separate entity, but it is advantageous to have someone of his stature here so heavily invested in Oregon. And this is helping elevate the perception of Oregon. We're seeing the results. We're getting more press. We're experiencing some significant breakthroughs in the national marketplace. We've been a Wine and Spirits Top 100 winery, I think 4 out of the last 6 years. And, I think for a long time, Jay Christopher never really had an intentional path. And what you've seen the last couple of years is we've really set intention, and we're focusing on the sustainable project, and we're working with outside organizations to create standards, and we're focusing on certain paths, as we talked about, like our tiered structure. We never had that level of organization before, so it's maybe taken 25 years as a brand to get to this point. We started out local and through grassroots operations, but yeah, Jay Christopher is absolutely a rising winery.
Awesome. Yeah, I think so. And I think that this is a word that we need to incorporate as we're talking to our potential buyers. And if we're in front of customers of theirs somehow, I think we need to bring it up as well. And I appreciate you walking us through why that's important. And I want to get us to the point where we're accepting questions and answering them by reviewing some words that I think are powerful conversation starters and inclusions for all of you out there listening as you're introducing Jay Christopher Wines to other people, that we can use these words to accurately describe. It's not just propaganda. I think we have hopefully shown you in this webinar that these words accurately describe what's going on in this organization with this brand. And so as I researched through what the winery is doing and everything else, these are the words that really struck me. And I gave them back to the folks at Jay Christopher, and they said, yeah, we agree. Those are really great words. And so let's use them. And so let's go back through them again. And I think that the first one we have to bring up is the curiosity. It's very powerful. Curiosity is a powerful motivator. And in Ernie's case, it has motivated him to do many things in his life, including exploring Riesling in Australia and Washington State. But it made him curious as to the potential greatness that could be extracted for Pinot Noir from Oregon. And I think that Jay Christopher is proving it year in, year out. But you can't be curious and in a hurry in many cases. And patience is an absolute requirement in the wine industry if your idea is to create great wine, patience is essential. And so Jay Christopher has demonstrated, and especially through Ernie's leadership, a willingness to be patient to make wines great. Yes, Ernie is from Germany, but this is an inherently local project. And we need to tell it that way. It is about Oregon. It is about the wines and vineyards and capability of Oregon. It is a local attitude and a local project. And as Ernie spoke to himself, he feels very at home there. He's sort of a local by nature when he's there. And it's not like he showed up there last week. He's been involved in Oregon for a long time. Restraint. One of the things that marks this winery is restraint in their habits, and certainly that they make wines that show restraint. That doesn't mean they're thin or uninteresting. It means that they are balanced and that they have placed all of the componentry in the right place. I think it's important that we can talk about them as being sustainable. It's a big word. It's important. They're focused in on it. And our customer bases, both buyers at the retail and restaurant level and their customers, are asking about wines and how they're treating the environment. We can be confident with this winery about that idea. Another word that we can definitely use in our conversations, as you've heard a lot today, is the idea of longevity. This is a long-term project to produce long-term fabulous wines that somebody's children can drink after they've bought it and thank their parents for buying it and putting it in a cellar. Or because great wine is balanced from day one, they can drink it this year, whichever they choose. But longevity is in the mindset of this concept. And last, because of all these things, J. Christopher is undeniably rising in Oregon. And we need to speak of it as such, because there are names that are more famous, perhaps, in the mind of the consumer in Oregon. But that won't be forever, because what's going on here is going to be worthy of discussion and worthy of attention far broader than it currently has. And until all those cases are all sold so fast that Ernie has to say, wait a minute, slow down. We're supposed to be holding on to this wine. What are you talking about? We're sold out already. And that would be fabulous. I just want to personally thank you all for joining us today and talking to our team. We had a really significant number of our team on the webinar listening in and watching, and I'm just really thrilled that they got to hear your story from you. And I look forward to interacting with all of you again in the future.